into this neurotypical work. So yeah, let's get it up. We have a tight packed schedule and I have two wonderful individuals that I would like to introduce. And the first is Racquel Joseph. Say hi. I think Racquel, you're mute.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everyone. I'm Racquel Joseph. I am really excited to be here today to talk about my experience working in marketing and media and content as a neurodivergent person. I'm Black and African American. Excuse me, I'm Black and Haitian American. And next month, I'm starting a new role as the Chief Digital Content Officer for the Omega Holistic Institute, which is a very different route for me after years working in tech marketing, and my neurodivergence has everything to do with that. So excited to dig in and share more. Great to meet you all.
So a little bit more about Racquel. You know, the Omega Holistic Institute is a non-for-profit educational organization at the forefront of holistic studies, stewarding about 250 acres in Hudson Valley. She was just sharing with us how she walked her dog with her wife. Racquel serves on the board of the New York City Anti-Violence Project, as secretary and member of Strategic Planning Committee, and the board of Level Forward and Impact Media Companies. Actually quite great. I checked them out. Both support her passion for social justice, community, and content, hence her being here. She forgot to tell you this part. She's a California Texan. I'm hoping she's not wearing her boots today. With new roots in Beacon, New York, in Hudson Valley, and where she teams up with her wife, Gina, and her dog, Troy, for adventures and doing lots of DEI projects. Let's give her like a warm virtual welcome. Yay, awesome sauce. That's my favorite phrase. You'll hear me say that a lot tonight. And then we have Mr. Llyod Thompson-Taylor. Quick, Llyod Thompson, tell us just a little bit and I'll do the rest.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Llyod Thompson-Taylor. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am Black and Jamaican American. Big up Jamaica. And I'm also excited to talk about this topic. I love that we're talking about this, especially during Black History Month. It's such an important topic. To talk about Black neurodivergence specifically, as you know, we're moving through these spaces and trying to take up more room. And that's something I want to do and want to help other people do, is like take up room in these corporate spaces or wherever it is that your job takes you, you know, to just make your voice heard and just create space for all of us. So I'm excited to get into it.
Thank you, Llyod. And Llyod is a editor and technical communicator. He said, born and raised in the DMV area from Jamaican immigrants, and his lifelong love of reading and writing sparked his passion for language, and it kind of like impacts how he relates to ourselves, others, and how we move through the world. I love that word, move through the world. So derailed from his dreams of working as a publishing editor by a call from his first employer, Llyod kind of fell into the world of federal government contracting. If I know how that feels, so I feel for him by chance. Working as a technical editor, writer, and analyst for agencies for the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and in his current role as Assistant Vice President and Senior Technical Communications Consultant with the US Bank, he really supports senior management to a great level with projects, websites, presentations, and all of that. Llyod earned his BA in English Language and Literature with minors in Spanish and journalism from, this is my difficulty, Hood College. I hope I pronounced it right. I struggle with the H's. And he's completing the research requirement for his MS in Technical and Professional Communication from UW Stout. Awesome sauce. Welcome, Llyod. Thank you. I'm excited to have these two. We're going to kick it off. So before we get started, I feel like there has to be a little bit of education around it. And for those that are neurotypicals, and for those that be like, what is this? I'm not quite familiar with this, as I've been asked the past week. Neurodiversity describes is an umbrella term for neurotypicals and neurodiverse individuals like us. For those, this quick little thing, we're not going to go into too much detail. You can Google it if you want. Neurodivergent refers to an individual whose brain functions in ways that are very different from the neurotypical, what we call normal people in the world. So neurodiverse is a group of people, how we are here today on the panel. And that means we have one or more kind of like different styles of brain functioning and brain types. So think about neurodivergent singular, neurodiverse plural. Neurotypical is the rest of the world. So we fit into that kind of pocket where individuals whose brain develops normal way of functioning, deemed normal, and I'm using quotes, deemed normal. And neurodivergence is kind of like the state of being neurodivergent. And that's it. If you want to learn more, we can talk about that. But for now, let's kick it off. My first question, and I'm not a stats person, but this really stood out for me. Based on different studies, between 15 to 20% of the population is neurodiverse. Population, and this is global, including up to 10% of people who are diagnosed with dyslexia, 5 diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and 1 to 2% with autism. So I'm going to throw the question first to Racquel. So Racquel, in your own words and your experience that you've had as a neurodivergent person, how would you define your neurodivergence?
So as a late diagnosed neurodivergent, I still have a lot of exploring to do, but I now know some things that apply to me, including the fact that I have ADHD. I also have social differences like social anxiety, sensory challenges, which definitely crop up in the workplace. And then I also am working through some learnings around demand avoidance. So there's a lot of layers to all of these things that I'm still exploring. But the most important definition that I've really taken away is that I have a specific way of moving through this world, and I need to do everything I can to support that. And so for me, the categories are a little bit less important than finally meeting my own needs so I can fulfill my potential.
Beautifully said. I love that. As I said again, moving through the world, right? It's about flow. Love that. Llyod, what's your take? I'm curious to know your perspective.
Yes. So for me, when I first started thinking about this, I came to it as like a negative or a lack. Like for me, it always felt like I was missing part of the conversation, or the way I was reacting to situations in workspaces just in general. Like it always felt like I was the one that was off for some reason. Like, oh, why aren't you getting this? Why can't you just focus and sit down and like be in this 3-hour meeting that we're all in? Like why, like can't, which was not helpful for me, because then I got into this little spiral of like, oh my God, why can't I just, figure this out? Why can't I just be like everybody else? Quotation marks. So for me, it presents in a few specific ways that I've noticed. Like for one, I get restless, like physically and like mentally. Like I gotta move. My brain has to keep working. I have like 1,000 thoughts, and they're all going at once. And like that doesn't ever seem to stop for me. Like people are like, oh, just relax, just close your eyes. Like that doesn't help for me. And then another thing that's super specific, so hopefully somebody else will get this. Like I personally, like when I'm asked a rhetorical question, I do not get it. Like I always have an answer. Like I'm responding. And like, but I get it. Like when I ask rhetorical questions, I understand what they are. But for me, whenever I'm asked a question, I'm like, okay, cool, response. I have to, I train, not even train, I just am. Like I just have to have a response. And I do. I just have like, yes, this. And then people will look at me and side eye me like, what are you doing there? So those are just a few of my specific experiences. Working on reframing this, and hopefully we'll talk about this. This is not a negative. And I hope other people will, if you take away anything from my experience, like do not put yourself in that negative box. There is space for you. And one of the things I'm hoping we'll talk about is how do we continue to make these spaces that are traditionally one way, like more accessible and like responsive to the people who are actually in them. People like us, Black people.
That's right. I love that. You got me at going so fast, right? 10,000 miles an hour. Folks don't get that. Sometimes our mouths have to catch up. So I have to ask you as a follow-up question, how do you self-regulate? By self-regulation, for those that don't know what that means, kind of like to get me out of that state where I feel like I'm going to combust, to get my energy back to a level that I won't say neurotypical, where I can use my executive functioning, make decisions, feel good about what I am doing. So what I do is with self-regulation for me is I pet my dog. She's a service dog. It really calms me, endorphins, so whatever, or I forgot what it's called. And I do really 2-minute breathing, deep breathing exercises because my anxiety is over the top. So Llyod, if you have to think about self-regulation, maybe it's not instinctual, but you probably are doing it. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so one thing that I've had to set up for myself in professional spaces specifically, and we'll talk about this, I think, later also, is like, I have to, like for my work specifically, I tell my boss, like, hey, I have set projects that I'm always working on, but like, I need to have other things. I need to have other side projects, other areas where, if I'm just so frazzled on this one thing and beating my head against the wall, I got to put it down, look at something else, work on something else, just sort of keep that restless energy in check. So I've done that. And then for me, this might not be possible for everybody. I have given myself a firm rule that I do not have any meetings before 10 a.m. Like, I can't deal with it. I can't do it. If one happens on the calendar, I will politely slash anything up to angrily get them to move that, because I'm like, I cannot do this. Like, if you want me to be a productive person and not just sort of like unleash on you about why we have a meeting at 9 a.m. and just could have been an email. So those are two things I am implementing for myself, just to sort of get myself in a space where I can be like, okay, let's, I'm managing and sort of dealing with what I am with the way that I work, and not just sort of conforming myself to the sort of standard idea of what the professional space should be.
Love that. Racquel.
Yeah, heavy on that, Llyod. My whole career, I masked so hard that I didn't even know what regulation was. I didn't know that I was dysregulated, and I would periodically have these, what I called like meltdowns every 6 to 8 weeks, like clockwork. My whole body would shut down. My mind would shut down. I would take hours to recover. And they just kind of kept getting worse as I got more senior. I got older, took on more responsibilities as an adult, and I didn't understand. And I was taking a lot of steps to try to address it. I was in therapy. I was diagnosed with various things, but no one ever once said to me, maybe you're neurodivergent. And I look back at my notes and I literally described masking to a T, and no one gave me that name, right? And so for me, I'm on a journey of learning how to regulate. A lot of what I do now is a very complex maintenance routine that I'm able to do because I took some time off of work. So that means eating a protein-rich breakfast, taking all of my supplements, staying on my meds, getting an hour of exercise. I mean, it's a rigorous routine that's probably not realistic once I'm, again, working full time, right? And so some other ways that I'm working on regulation is using sensory techniques like cold therapy, compression, brown and white noise, using earplugs regularly to help me not get sensory overwhelm from audio stimulation. So these are all things I'm experimenting with that prevent dysregulation. What do I do once I'm dysregulated? That's something I'm still working on. And right now I'm like in this luxury space of staying regulated because I have so much time to just work on it. In the future, when I get dysregulated, I'm most likely going to fall back on old techniques like isolation and trying to get back into my rigorous routine, right? So I still need some tools, and I'm sure I'll find them as I need them, but I'm also no longer afraid to be dysregulated now that I know what it is and I know how to take care of myself better. And so just like regulation in the workplace is something that everyone can use. I've seen my coworkers get dysregulated. Maybe they don't know what it it is. Maybe it's related to like anxiety or something else. And I like being able to support them through that. And also, learn new ways to help myself.
Thanks for sharing. I love that. It's such a nice segue there, whereby I love how you both own that kind of like, there's nothing wrong with me. I know my body, I know myself, and it's a nice state to be in when you are regulated. And yes, Racquel, as you know, like when you become dysregulated, it's really hard, and you have a coping mechanism already. I do the same thing. I retreat, I have my silent moments. So the segue to that for me boils down to how people sometimes view us as we are disabled or we have disability. This is really like more an identity thing. Like I know when I used to apply for jobs, I used to check, yes, I have a disability, because I have other things, not just my neurodivergence. So as we know, disability is a complicated thing, right? Often, though, it is defined more by society's expectations than by our individual conditions. So not always, but really just often. The neurodivergent people can also be diagnosed with other mental conditions. In fact, 2 out of 3 people with ADHD have another condition, such as anxiety, depression, and or OCD. That's me, with some other stuff too. And autistic people are at a higher risk for mental health conditions. So that's when they are saying disability, that's kind of like where it falls under. So Racquel, I'm gonna throw this back at you. How does it intersect for you and your identity, or does it?
Yeah, it intersects greatly. So I mentioned before, I'm a Black queer woman. I come from sort of like a mixed class, mostly working class background. And I think that absolutely affects how I received care. As I was going on this mental health journey that led me to understand that I'm, part of this community. And I think it absolutely affected how I was treated in the workplace and how I needed to navigate the workplace. So when you really think about it, like we all know that there's discrimination and exclusion in the workplace. And for me, I think part of the reason why I am so late diagnosed and kind of coming to this a little bit later in life was because it was always very hard to distinguish, is this like a typical microaggression or discrimination? Am I not fitting in or understanding the culture here or the social cues here because I am not in the majority in this space? It just, all of these different signals and cultural factors were, muddying my own personal challenges. And I had also been prepped to expect these spaces to be really challenging for me. Now that I am regulated and know more, they didn't have to be quite that hard. I learned now. But at the time, I was like, this is just what it means to be a person with my identities working in corporate America. And, I felt getting therapeutic care and other things, this is the best that's available to me. So if this isn't helping me, it's a me problem maybe. And I think that, the intersections of my identity definitely contributed to the challenges I had navigating this journey and learning to adapt.
Absolutely. And I'm with you there, to the point that the doctor here in Seattle didn't want to prescribe me my anti-anxiety meds. Her biggest thing was, hey, I don't know you. I don't prescribe benzos. And I'm like, it's in my chart. All my stuff is funneled over to your portal. And I filed a racial bias report because I could sense that. So I feel you, I hear you, I'm with you. We need to advocate for ourselves. Llyod, let's piggyback off that.
Yes. So intersectionality is such a big impact. When it comes specifically to the idea of disability, I'm newer to this. I do have what people would call an invisible disability. I have like a severe sleep disorder, which like for like a year when I did not have my proper machine, I literally could not stay awake during a 9-to-5 schedule, which impacted that one job I had. I was in the office at that time. And that made things harder for me because it's so important to advocate for ourselves in these spaces. But for me, there was always this fear of like, okay, if I tell them there's something wrong with me, then they're gonna be like, what else is wrong with you? Do I have to come out as neurodivergent? Because again, and even that's kind of scary because I'm Black, I'm queer, a whole lot of other identities that I'm like struggling, like, what do I present? Like, and what's, professional to present in the workplace, and that whole conversation, which is really a mindfuck.
And we're going to touch on intersectionality. That's where the cookie crumbles, right? That's what we are waiting for to go, like, talk about that later.
This question, it doesn't affect it. It opens the conversation, but it also makes it harder for me to navigate. Because again, I didn't grow up with these words and these terms, so I'm coming to them later. But I'm also like, okay, well, I'm glad I have these terms because now they help me like really figure out and define what's going on with me, and then that helps me figure out what I need. Of course, the next step is how do we get those needs met or figure out those patterns and rhythms, and how do we get the buy-in from companies, which I think we'll talk about later. But all the conversations really I've struggled with in my career, and I'm coming to a place now. I'm like, okay, this is important for me to handle it if I'm going to stay in this, these spaces, and like I said, take up spaces for others and make sure that the next person doesn't have it as hard as I did. So that's my current thought process around that.
Karen, you're muted.
My first mute for the day. Yeah, haven't had you muted for the day. So thank you for sharing that. I know it feels like it's you coming out again, right? So I cannot wait to talk about our intersectionality piece, which is so amazing. And it's hard navigating these waters. And I feel you all. So my question that I have, and I read this in a Fast Company article today, which is so amazing. And I think it's fascinating how, and this is not really about work, right, in workplace, and how the person that wrote it is a leader, and he wrote for Fast Company, and he said that, when individuals are having difficulty meeting deadlines, completing tasks at work, leaders or fellow colleagues are taught to consider learning and thinking difference. They don't think about, it could be learning or thinking differences at work. And if a Black employee has grown up facing challenges with these tasks, but was never provided with a diagnosis or has been misdiagnosed, they may not know to advocate for themselves and the support they need to do their best work. So as you're now stepping into the realm of workplace, what challenges did you face as a Black professional in corporate America with your neurodivergent ability or abilities? I know Llyod, you touched a little bit on it, and so did Racquel. Llyod, if you could expand now a little bit more in terms of, even if you can give an example of really something that specifically happened that was like, wow, I'm not being served in a way with my disability for me to function effectively.
Yeah, sure. So challenges I faced. Well, there was the general sort of challenge, better now, but one of the things that I sort of first came to was like, I just felt so isolated. I felt so isolated because there were, again, I felt like I was missing out on the conversation. I was missing out on the joke, as it were, in professional spaces, in these offices. They're like, do this task, write this report, and just sort of, take it and go. In my experience specifically. And deadlines were never really a problem for me but that was because I was always so hyper-focused on like being normal and masking, doing what was expected of me. But even that led to a whole lot of like this invisible pressure on myself where I was constantly feeling like I had to perform and like, again, put on a good face and, ignore anything that I needed. Like, for instance, it was my first job, and we were in this meeting for like 3 hours. And it was like a standard, like, let's meet and talk about everything we need to talk about and sit down in this cramped little conference room. And I was dying inside. I was dying. I was like, can we go? Like, can we go do work? Like, I'd rather just be by myself and get my task done than like, I don't want to say that, but like this group think where we're like, it was like, oh, let's share ideas and like, collaborate. But it was really like, this is the way we're doing it. We're always going to do it this way. So then why were we having the meeting? Like, why have this like facade of like, let's collaborate and let's, I welcome these new ideas. But they weren't. So for example, and this is a good example for me advocating for myself. There was this project we were working on, and the owner, they never wanted to go through the official process. They always just wanted to sort of take it and run with it on their own. And because they were this high up in the business, they were sort of allowed to do what they wanted. And for me, I was like, well, what if we did let them do that? Like go through the process, because the process is not, it's not for our help. It's to make sure that your document is seen and evaluated and collaborated on, just so it's in the best shape it can be before it goes out, the official DoD policy that goes, that applies to everybody. And it was scary because I was like, okay, that's how I'm just going to say it, because nobody else is like putting their hand up. And I'm like, okay, I can't sit here and say nothing. We gotta move the needle. And even if that sort of makes me call myself out. So that was a big challenge for me. And I sort of jumped into it, but then there was no safety net. There was no like mentor. There was nobody like me, either, Black or neurodivergent or both, to sort of catch me if I fell or to give me advice. So a lot of this I was figuring out on my own, sort of stumbling around. And yeah, it was very isolating. And I didn't have, again, these terms or any resources that were going to provide you at the end. Just Karen had some great ones. So figuring, sort of being in the, sort of feeling like you're in the water by yourself, surrounded by sharks or something. That sort of general anxiety sort of just, made made everything worse for me.
Oh, I can imagine. So I guess there was a lesson in there for you to the day that you can carry with, because not only were you exposed to that kind of environment, but it was kind of like a skill that you learned, not knowing that you've learned something just from that. Right? Yeah, no, it was definitely a good takeaway. Although, it took me a while to realize this was actually a good turning point for you. A, because I was just so deep in it, and B, again, I had nobody to reflect with and to like help me sort of unpack some things that happened. So I was always just sort of by myself carrying this weight. But you got to perform, you got to stay, you got to be professional, or else you might not get this opportunity again. I felt that a lot in my professional life. Great, thank you for sharing, and thank you for being vulnerable with that. Appreciate it. Racquel, what do you think?
Well, two things come to mind that consistently stumped my managers. So I think they're good examples. Llyod, you were just talking about being in the water, sort of surrounded by sharks. In the beginning of my career, I didn't understand how much the social part of work, how important that was. So it was kind of like all the sharks were swimming around me and I didn't even notice them for years. My manager would, who was also trying to be my mentor, would invite me to things like social things. And I'd be like, no, thank you, with no clue as to why I was being invited, why I should go. I'd heard like general networking advice, but I always thought that was more related to when you were actively job searching. I didn't understand how the social game was such a major part of the workplace. Also why I'm obsessed with Survivor. It's been very helpful for me. But so eventually my manager realized like he had to look me in the eyes and say, you need to come to these things and show face and meet people and talk about your work. And then after I would do that, he would then coach me, don't talk about your work so much. He really helped me navigate the social part. And then the second thing is I really have this, my particular brand of neurodiversity comes with this really lovely tension between rigidity and like hyperactivity. So I really would get frustrated when a priority was set, a vision was given, and then the team would scatter to the winds and just do whatever they wanted. And I was like, why are you doing this? This is our path. That was the rigidity at play. And then the other part at play was that I would be told that priority, and then, they would expect me to deliver 1 or 2 programs, and I would do like 15. And I never really struggled with hitting deadlines because I would just work to the point of burnout to over exceed. And, I was constantly getting promoted. I got promoted like 4 times in 3 years at my like second job out of college. I was an over performer, and it felt like my managers didn't know what to do with that. They didn't know how to like both rein me in and yet encourage my growth and skill. I was going way too fast at my personal expense. I was outpacing my coworkers in a way that was alienating. Those were things I really had to learn from great managers I was lucky to have to stop doing. And as a result, I've been able to, flex a little bit more, recognize when I'm being rigid, et cetera. But those first 5-6 years, I was just on another planet compared to everyone else.
Brutal. Oh my gosh, I get you. I didn't even know about deregulation, like my body. So I get you 100%. And especially if you know you are the smartest person in the room and you're like, why aren't these people like not getting it? So this is a great segue, Racquel, and I'm going to throw it back at you. So what do you think in terms of what unique value do we as Black neurodiverse employees bring to the workplace, knowing that we already contribute to the diversity numbers on our next great question, which is going to come with intersectionality. But what do you think? Give me like 3 things that you think we bring from a skill set to really uplift our workforce.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, with that rigidity really comes for me clarity of vision and process, really great high level synthesis. Once I know something, I know it. And I was really able to help kind of connect dots. And I started working across the organizations really quickly. Once people realized like keeping me in one place is not going to go well for anybody, move me around before anybody gets too annoyed by me. I'm better now. And then also I would say like creativity, calm in a crisis. I think because there is so much going on here all the time, crises don't tend to faze me. So I find that that's a common thing with my neurodiverse peers is crisis hits, everyone's like, and I'm just sitting there like, oh, finally something interesting to do. And I'm ready to work through it. So I think those are great assets in any workplace.
Thank you. I love that. I'm for that because I have anxiety attached to mine. So one thing's to work a certain way and I'm like, and I lose my shit. Like, oh my God, I know what to do. Llyod, what do you think? What do we bring that is really like, this is it? We are needed in this workforce.
So the first thing I would say is like, there's to sort of piggyback off what Racquel was saying, like, there's like an inherent flexibility that comes along with, at least my experience being Black and neurodiverse, because we're already supposed to, we have to, it's kind of like a survival thing, have to be able to have conversations with different people, whether that's white people, and then, sort of the professional lingo, but also, again, having our own internal conversations and sort of patterns. So I think that's a big thing, like pattern recognition and being able just to sort of navigate these different spaces. Again, part of that is sort of survival defense mechanism, but it's a good skill to have, no matter how we got it. Another thing I would say is, at least for me, I'm good at like creating connections with different areas of the office and like that's just the environments, the cultures I'm in, mostly because for me it's part of a defense mechanism, because I just have to be able to like know my area, be comfortable with what's where and who's there and who's here. Partly so I can know what I can get away with. Sounds kind of negative, but like what I can actually do and where I need to go when things are needed, and also when I just need a break. Like, okay, who do I need to keep an eye out for, and where, so I can just decompress, or just sort of these energies are like super intense and I cannot be around them if I'm having a bad day. So like let me sort of avoid them as much as possible, but just sort of that ability to sort of evaluate space is, I think, really valuable. And really, it's not really highlighted because we just sort of do it automatically. But it's actually a thing that like companies don't know that, well, they're starting to get the idea that they really need that in people, where it's like that level of like emotional intelligence, just sort of like awareness that I've seen like people highlighting a lot more. But I'm like, that's something that I think I've had and had to develop, again, part of it because I felt like these spaces are kind of foreign to me. So I gotta I got to figure it out. Those are my answers.
Love that. Thank you. What a great segue. So my question back at you, Llyod, is, so knowing what we know now, the experiences that we've had, and for folks that are just unmasking in the workplace. So for those that unmasking is basically coming out, like uncovering, because we cover when we go to work because we're afraid how we might be treated. So if you think about actionable steps that you would recommend to a CEO, HR, manager, coworker, colleagues, how to create a supportive environment to amplify and leverage Black neurodiverse talent, because that's what we hear today about, for Black neurodiverse talent. Yes, we have our brothers and sisters on the other spectrums all around us, but today it's really about that, because it's also about self-advocacy for us, right? So what would be one or two kind of like recommendations that you would give? And Rocky, if you see it's kind of similar to yours, that would be great. Then we can move on to the next question, the intersectionality one that I'm so excited to touch on.
Right. So step one, and I think this is kind of obvious to me, but I feel like we still keep saying it, like invite these Black neurodivergent voices to the table, open up these spaces. It's easy for everybody to say, hey, we value diversity or we want your opinion, but like, don't talk about it, be about it. Like, and that needs to be clear and apparent, because it's not enough just to, you know, sort of hang up a welcome sign. You need to be welcoming. You need to open the door, not just, you know, put us on the door saying, hey, we need you, like show us that. Again, being vulnerable, having these conversations, looking at your practices, in particular, maybe from an HR perspective, like don't be so rigid on, you know, when you're creating a job post and you're interviewing candidates saying, boom, 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 if you're not, you know, if they don't meet your list of requirements, oops, I guess they're not valuable. Like, and figure out what exactly you're doing beyond, I mean, this goes back to sort of that emotional intelligence, like beyond just, I need an employee who will make me money. Like, what's the long term? Because I feel like a quick fix is like, let's hire some Black people. You know, get those diversity numbers up, you know, get that 2022 award. But like, that's not enough. That's the bare minimum. Not even a bare minimum. That's like, you should already be doing that. Like, you should just be doing that. Like, you don't get an award for that. Like, so go above and beyond. And I'm saying that, again, inviting us to the table, having these conversations, looking at your practices. What do you need long term? What does your business actually need? Your business needs people who are going to stay, invest, who are going to offer new ideas, and actually, you know, stick around to implement them. They need to feel welcome. They need to feel like they have a voice and are able to advocate for themselves. That's so hard. Like, I am all for self-advocacy, but if you like that, so much is easier to say, but it's hard to do. And then if you're shot down once or you don't feel like you have that support, it's even like 10 times as harder to try again. But it's important. But again, and even then, like in terms of masking, like there were jobs that I did not feel comfortable either with like HR, like in that job space to even think about unmasking. Like even I didn't have the term, but I knew what I was doing. I was like, I always thought about it like I literally said, I am putting on a performance every time I go to work. Like I'm buttoning up and I'm tucking away those parts of me. Again, we'll talk about that I think more in intersectionality. But that's my sense.
I'll just add really quickly, Karen, that that was amazing, Llyod. Yes to all of that. I would just add that supporting excellence is so helpful. And when I say excellence, I mean like excellence in leadership and management and the training and resources to help people get there. Because to Llyod's point, like we don't have the language. The generation before us that may be leading the workplace don't have the language. So we need the education, training, resources, and support for leaders and management to be excellent so that these other, you know, DEI and B initiatives can actually succeed. You know, it doesn't necessarily help for there to be training and accommodations when managers don't even know what accommodations are. So I just have to add that because there's just a lot of ignorance, like not willful necessarily, but benign, that is quite harmful to the company's ability to be successful with neurodivergent employees.
Great. So as we are coming up on time, I love that, and I can so dissect that as a coach, because I'm getting so excited, because like, yes, that's what I'm here for, to educate, right? We're coming up on about 10 minutes before we go out, but I really think there are two more questions I would like to ask. As we are getting a time check here, any questions so far? Or can I ask that you all keep your questions till the end? I promise you're gonna have time to ask your question to the panelists. So the question that I've been dying to ask is, how is your intersectionality, your identity, such as your race, your gender, sexual orientation, your culture, your socioeconomic status, impacted your experience as a neurodivergent person? I'll throw it at you, Rocky, first.
Sure. So culture is a big one, coming from a Black and Haitian American family that had traditional values that weren't always very women friendly, female friendly. I think that, from a young age, already socialized to tuck away these parts of ourselves that are different and to hide some of the neurodiverse behaviors that naturally come out. I mean, I'm a fidgety adult. If you saw me as a child, you would never believe it, because I had been really trained to be still, to be quiet, to be small. And that's just one example that has carried through my whole life, right? So when it gets to career, I think the other element that has been very impactful for me has been race. Because as a Black person working in tech, which, we're quite in the minority, there were just a stampede of microaggressions, of macroaggressions, of ignorance, prejudice that really was just this extra challenging layer to dig through to get to the work. And, maybe if I wasn't fighting for fair pay, I would maybe have had more time to figure out what accommodations worked for me in the workplace and, would allow me to do more in the workplace. So that identity, I think we're made to feel it's very, very complex. Because there are so many differentials, but it's not that complex. I'm just a whole human, and feeling like a complex being in the workplace and in the world. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to feel like you're a puzzle that other people have no interest in solving, want to scatter the pieces for you, et cetera. So I think that now I'm a little bit more settled in that, in that identity, a little more comfortable in seeking spaces where I can be that whole person. But the truth of the matter is, there just aren't that many of them, right? And I'm not even talking about perfection here. I'm talking about places that are trying to hold space at all. And so this conversation, other conversations like this, are going to help us expand those options for people. I hate feeling, as I get more senior in my career, that funnel is narrowing, not because of seniority, but because of availability of places where I can thrive. And so that's how intersectionality has really impacted me. There is a narrowing that is happening for me now. And it's in some ways very good for me as a privileged person that can find those places. But it also it's a sad reality for a lot of people who won't be as successful. And we know neurodivergent people do struggle to be fully employed and to be full participants in society. And I think it's something we really need to address as a community.
And to be recognized for what we do bring to the table in many ways. Llyod, your thoughts on this, sir?
Yeah, I think intersectionality has a huge effect. For me personally, I'm Black, I'm queer, I identify as first generation. I think both my parents were Jamaican immigrants. We lived below the poverty line growing up, so I make money now, but that affected me and still affects the way I sort of show up and work. Because I've always felt like I have to stay on the right path, or you have to stay on this path. And if I ever fall off the path, I'm Black, so I'm gonna go to jail, or I'm queer and they're gonna fire me. Like I have it's like tucking away these parts of yourself. And some people are like, well, it's not, this is not the appropriate environment to show that part of yourself. But at the same time, to Rocky's point about that social aspect, How many people bring how many sort of straight people bring their spouses to brunches, to happy hours, and sort of meeting the family is a part of sort of modern work culture. But for me, I was never comfortable saying, hey, I'm gonna bring my boyfriend, or like I'm gonna bring my partner. Like I just recently told one of my coworkers, me and my partner, are having dinner. But again, I'm just trying to be like, just be more in this space. I put my pronouns in my email subject, in my email signature, because I just want to create these spaces. But like, there was times when I never would have done that. Like that's the fact that I'm doing it now is almost kind of crazy to me that I'm doing it, because I'm like, wow, this is not something I was doing. And part of it is like, I'm just gonna, again, open up and sort of like make space and take up space for myself and hopefully for other people behind me. Yeah, another one is like mental health. At least in my family, in my experiences, with a Black person and a Jamaican person, the idea was just to grin and bear it. Just get through it. You don't have time for that. You gotta perform. I remember this quote, and it's been said before, but it was on Scandal. Olivia Pope's father said to her, we have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And I felt that in sort of earlier stages of my career. I have to be on, I have to perform, I have to put myself in these social spaces where I was on the other side of Racquel, like I knew about it. And I would gear myself up, like, okay, I gotta talk to 2 people at the brunch. I gotta talk to the boss during happy hour because they gotta see my face. But that's for me, it was exhausting. It's like, do not do well with crowds. I'm a complete introvert. I just want to be by myself and do my work and only meet when we absolutely need to meet. And if not, it could be an email and should be an email.
I hate small talk. I get you. And by the way, my in-laws are also Jamaican. And for a decade, it was like, oh, it's Michelle's friend. So I hear you, I feel you, and you're not alone. So last question, and this is important. I don't know, Marvel's a DC comic for you guys? I don't know. But question is, what is your superpower? What is your superpower that others come difficult, is a difficulty for others, but it comes so easy for you? Like something quick. Llyod, I'll let you piggyback of that after your last talk.
Sure. So I would say my superpower is my curiosity. Like I really have this like desire to just know things, especially in business. Like I want to know what everybody else is doing. Like, talk to me about your job. What are you doing every day over here in marketing over here? What are the engineers doing? And partly, I know that partly that's a defense mechanism, because I just like, if I have the knowledge, then I'll be able to answer the question, and then I'll justify my place in this office, and they won't fire me, or I won't be looked down on. And I know that, but then that part of it is just, I'm just so genuinely curious about like what is going on in other people's brains. How are they communicating that? Which is why I like, again, technical communication. It's really about, getting to the heart of the matter. What's important? How do we convey that? And how do we convey that in a way that everybody understands? Not just, one way for all people. That's not, I aspire to be a communicator. I want to meet you where you're at. And, I have a story to tell, I have information to give you, but how do you best receive that? And that's one of the things I love trying to figure out and working with people on.
Love that.
Can we just note the high correlation between queerness and neurodivergence? There's a lot of information out there. It's really interesting. You should check that out. And I actually had the exact same answer as Llyod, practically word for word. So stole my last answer. And, special interest, it's a double-edged sword. It's incredibly useful when your special interest is aligning with the work and the job that you have. Sometimes it burns out. Sometimes it, fizzles and then it becomes the other side of the sword. But I think that, exactly what Llyod said is the superpower for so many of us. And it can be a game changer in the workplace.
Wow, wonderful. I love that. There is one more question, but before I ask that, any questions for our panelists? We have like 3 minutes left. Kenny said he'll give us a grace period of 5 minutes. So any questions for our panelists? Please, by all means. You can come off mute, or you can post a question in the chat, or you can send me a private message and I will ask the question if you're shy.
Someone has their hand raised.
Yeah, I see
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. I don't see it. Oh, here we go.
Is that
Hold
me?
on. Yeah, there you go, Joyson. Go. You can ask your question.
Firstly, thank you for everyone that facilitate this space. I think I would consider myself neurotypical, but I've gained so much knowledge from this discussion thus far. In my experience being in school, I think a lot of the language used by my peers and referencing those that maybe have been on the spectrum of autism or ADHD was very, very demeaning and dehumanizing. And can cause people to think that having a disability is a bad thing or a disadvantage, or more so. Yes, but I guess I wanted to ask if there are any ways in which your neurodivergence serves you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say my neurodivergence has shaped the life that I have, which looks like none of my peers that really, like the group that I grew up with, the background that I have, it just opened up every possibility to me in a way that's been really powerful. I think because I didn't understand what track everyone was thinking down a lot of the time, I ended up carving my own path. And then secondly, I think it's really opened my eyes to disability justice and ableism, which has been a game changer for how I live my life and how I plan to live my life as I age and things like that.
Thank you.
For me, it helps me like really learn and like put into practice self-advocacy. Like that is so important. And I had to do it because again, there was nobody else in my space, either professionally, I felt like I could trust, because I felt like if I, came out to them as neurodivergent, they would look at me different, I would get fired. And there was, again, no one even around me that I could talk to sort of on my level in these different offices and jobs I was in. So I had to learn how to speak up. And again, it's so hard, especially in these spaces where you may be the only Black person, you may be the only Black neurodivergent person in these spaces, but like I just had to do it. So in one sense, I'm glad that I had these experiences, because it forced me to get out of my comfort zone and like really speak up in some instances where, for me, my instinct was, okay, let's go with the flow. Don't make too much noise, keep your head down. That I think as Black people, we've sort of learned to just do in general.
Thank you. Joyce, are you happy with those answers?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Great. Any more questions before we bring this to a close? And I appreciate the panelists. I appreciate everybody showing up. We started at 70 something with 57. That's still a win in my book. So it's wonderful. And thank you for the time, Kenny, my brother from another mother, Llyod, brother from another mother, and Rocky's sister from another mister. I learned this the other day in the show. So this has been great, and I'm so honored to have met you all. If you have any questions, please, by all means, you can reach out to Kenny. He put in his details there. And if you don't know how to pull the transcript, in the chat box in the bottom right, the ellipsis, the three dots, you can click on that and you can go save chat. Thank you, everyone. Awesome sauce, panelists, and have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, on purpose. Bye.
All right.
Thank
Before everybody goes, let's just give another big round of applause for our wonderful moderator and our panelists. Definitely shout out to all of our alumni from our programs. We got some growth initiative, some grown alumni in the building. We got some growth initiative Take Two alumni and participants in the building. So shout out to all the participants in our programs currently going on and that have gone on over the past 3 years. We appreciate all of you being here and just sharing this moment with us in the garden. There's definitely a lot more to come. The team, basically, we just go back to work because we got Women's Month coming up next month. So, we're going to be putting together something really great for next month. So just stay tuned to all the socials. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And on that note, just keep rising in the garden. That's all we ask you to do. Connect, collaborate, and grow. Have a good night, everyone.
Right. Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night. Thank you.
Good night.
Mhm.